I think the thing that takes me out of any game when it comes to exploration is a game that has some sort of platforming system, but then randomly there are invisible walls where it's like, okay, I could jump over there. Like, I can clearly see I have the height to jump over there. My abilities get me there, no problem. But it's like, nope, you cannot do that. And the instant that happens, like, okay, I am playing a game right now.
Horizon does that as well, where the character will jump different lengths depending on whether you're allowed to jump it or not. It's terrible.
Okay.
I don't want to like heap shit on that game because I really enjoyed the game. I actually really liked it, but it's just there's a lot of stuff like that in it. Invisible worlds make children cry. Was something I was told by my art director back at Chrome, Chrome Studios up in Brisbane. He used to say, invisible walls make children cry. And he would say that because in playtesting some of the games there, they would bring in kids, including the art director's kids. They'd play the game, they'd run into invisible walls, and they would start crying because they couldn't go that way. Now, presumably they don't make adults cry when they're playing games, but I don't know, I've kind of taken that as my guiding philosophy when it comes to invisible walls in games from now on.
Yeah.
No, if I can run into an invisible wall, I shouldn't be able to get there.
Yeah.
I say that making a game where there are invisible walls everywhere because I don't allow players to fall off edges.
I think edges are different.
Anytime you walk, I think I get away with it because once you understand you can't fall off platforms in my game because there's no jumping. It's part of the puzzle solving is navigating the environment without just like jumping down and cheating past it. Once you understand that, it's fine and it doesn't become an obstacle. It doesn't become a incongruity. But yeah. But in general, if you're walking along a slope, whatever, you're going up into the mountains and then suddenly you hit a wall. I encountered this a lot in like Skyrim, playing that, and it's always disappointing. It's like, oh, I want to explore what's up this valley up here. All this, there's trees and rocks that looks interesting. I'm trying to get up there, and then suddenly you're hitting an invisible wall. It's like, oh, it's disappointing as an adult. It makes you cry as a child.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I played Sekiro recently. So at the start of the game, you can swim above water, and it's fine. But later in the game, you get the ability to dive. Now, you're supposed to use it to get through a zone later in the game, where you're in like this cave and you get through this underwater passage. But there's water in other areas, so I'm like, hey, what happens if we go back to the first zone that had a river in it? The river runs around the entire zone. I wonder if I can swim to the other side. No. You go through there and it's like, okay, randomly hit a wall. But, like, I get that you're not supposed to go there, and sure, but, like, at least put some rocks there or something that kind of, like, stops you from going any further where, it's weird that it's there. Why is it there? I don't know. Don't question it. But at least it's not nothing.
Yeah. I guess you kind of pick your battles, I suppose, with it a bit as well. Like, if you don't get this familiarity until halfway through the game, and you're not expected to ever go back to the early areas, then, I haven't played Sekiro, so I don't know how it's structured. Then maybe you go, look, some players are going to run back to the start of the game and try and swim up the river. Bugger it. Just we haven't got time to fix that. Focus on what's important.
Sure.
And you do run into troubles like, when you have an open world game, somehow you have to put barriers around it. The world map in Breath of the Wild has invisible worlds. Eventually you reach, like, sometimes it's a very high cliff, but you can actually climb up it a bit, and eventually you just hit a invisible wall. It's kind of disappointing. They've also got like a really deep canyon around one side that if you fall down it, you just die.
I think
which I think looks really weird, to be honest. I actually would almost prefer just like a larger cliff or something around the outside rather than a massive right angle chasm around the corner of the map. I'm not quite sure what happens if you try and sail off into the ocean far. Usually games are where you sail off it. A lot of games I find just like turn you around and send you back. So I don't know how Breath of the Wild handles it, but at some point, overworld games have to figure out how to deal with barriers when there is no physical barrier in the way.
A game that does that really well with like having a water there where it looks like it can go forever is the Jak and Daxter games. So in Jak 3, you go to this desert city at the start of the game and there's like this big ocean. It's like, oh, I can just swim out there. and then you go out there and get eaten by a kraken. Where it's like, there's no wall there, but if you go too far, you just die. Like, it comes up with a reason why you die.
Yeah, that's funny.
Personally, like that's how I don't like it where there's like a clear wall, but it effectively acts like a wall. It just feels more natural and like part of the game, and it feels like you can get away from it, right? Like if you navigate
it doesn't have to be realistic. Yeah, it doesn't have to be realistic or anything either. Like I really don't like when people make the argument that something has to be in a game for the sake of realism. Or something can't be in a game because of realism. It's usually a disingenuous argument for a start, but let's not even get into that. They're usually whinging about something else entirely. Right. But what's important is that I think it doesn't feel discontinuous with your experience. It doesn't pull you out of the experience. An invisible wall often pulls you out of experience because you're walking along and then suddenly you come to a stop.
Yeah.
It's like, and then suddenly you remember you're playing a game and you can't go any further. And that's always just kind of abrupt and disappointing. So, it can just be a simple thing. It could be like the wind blows you back. It could be a kraken comes out and eats you. Whatever. It's something that doesn't draw you out of the experience. It doesn't have to be realistic then. It just has to feel a little bit more natural than an abrupt halt.
Right. And it's one of those things where if something weird does happen, you're like, oh, well, that's something I can like talk to someone about. Like, hey, do you know if you swim out too far, like this thing happens? Like, oh, no, I didn't know that. I'm going to try that. Like, oh, that's cool. And it gives you this thing to remember that game by. And that's something that like, I haven't played the Jak and Daxter games in a long time, but it's something that I always think about whenever I think back on those games.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, it's always, well, yeah, it's an opportunity then to do something memorable to make people. Which kind of brings us back to the discussion about teaching players stuff. If you can figure out a way to make something a learning experience or fun, then there's an opportunity there. If you can figure out a way to see a problem, and rather than going for the simple solution, like pop up text on screen or throw up an invisible wall, figure out a creative way of dealing with it that allows a player to learn a new system or surprise the player or create something that enhances their enjoyment of the game rather than just, whatever, this is how the thing functions, don't worry about that. Get back to the other part of the game.
Get back to the manufactured fun. It is fun time now. Have fun.
Yeah, go back. You're not near the fun. Go away. Go back over there.
Yeah. No, you were saying before about your game not letting you walk off of platforms. I initially didn't realize you couldn't walk off of platforms, so I was like avoiding the edge. Like the second I realized you couldn't, like okay, I played games like this. I think that's the one time that people just forgive invisible wall because your game doesn't have a jump button, so it makes sense that you can't interact with ledges in that same way that you would be able to in a lot of other games.
Yeah, and it was something I was toying with for a while, whether I would actually include a jump button and allow people to fall off edges. And I was very uncertain about whether to do it or not. Because many of the environment puzzles I had designed up to that point relied on the fact that you would not be able to fall off. And I mean, from very early on in the game, in the design process, I knew I wanted to have environments made of like weird floating platforms and shifting and moving things. And I decided early on not to allow it to fall off so that it was a lot easier to navigate, because often these are very small platforms and I don't want people just like falling off all the time because they don't take the corner sharp enough or something. Right. And also then it allowed me to design puzzles where you couldn't just cheat it by like leaping down to a lower platform and bypassing a section. So I designed the game, large parts of the game like that. And then as we were playtesting, people go, I want to jump. Why can't I fall off? I'm like, should I go back and introduce that? Should I allow you to walk off the edge? Should I, do this thing? And ultimately, I decided not to, simply because I'd have to redesign all of these puzzles for one thing. I would have to handle. There's a whole bunch of additional code considerations there as well, how to handle that. Because if you fall off, then potentially you can get stuck in areas, and there's a lot more of, there's a lot of QA that has to happen then to make sure you can't get stuck, or how I handle what happens if a player lands on like a slope and slides somewhere and gets stuck in a little crevice. Like, what do I, do I have to like place collision to get you out of there? Do I have to like, I don't know, place respawn volumes everywhere.
Give you some sort of like cheese thing to like teleport back up to the top or something.
Yeah, so it introduced a whole bunch of these aren't unsolvable problems. Like, there's plenty of games where you can jump up and get stuck in places and you get out of it. So, but that's a whole lot of additional considerations that I wasn't planning on initially. Plus, having to redesign all the puzzles is like, nah, screw it. You can't fall off edges. You can't jump. This is the game I'm making. You explore the game using the abilities I give you. And one of those abilities is not to jump. So if you want to traverse to a platform up there, you have to use the translocator ability, which allows you to sort of like grapple to a point and teleport to that point, and that sort of thing. So that's kind of my substitute jump, I suppose.